My name is Daniel. I am 50, 3 years old. I have rough hands, a tired back, and a heart that has loved one woman for 31 years. I am a teacher, not a doctor, not a businessman, not an engineer with a BMW in the driveway. Just a simple school teacher who spent his whole life writing on a chalkboard, grading papers under a lamp at midnight, and believing, truly believing, that the work I did mattered. I believed that right up until the morning of March 14th, the morning of my wife's 51st birthday. The morning she looked me in the eye and said words that I will carry in my chest for the rest of my life. But before I tell you what happened that morning, let me take you back. Let me show you the man I was before that day cracked something inside me. Because you need to understand, this story did not start with one morning. It started 31 years ago, with a young man who had nothing but love in his pockets and a dream in his heart. My wife's name is Patricia. When I first met her, she was 20 years old. She had long black hair, a sharp laugh, and eyes that made you feel like the most important man in the room. I was a student teacher at the time, 22 years old, studying education, wearing the same 2 shirts on rotation because I could not afford a third. Her family was not rich, neither was mine. We were 2 ordinary people who fell in love in an ordinary way, walking home from the same bus stop, sharing an umbrella in the rain one Thursday afternoon, talking for 3 hours on a park bench when we were both supposed to be somewhere else. I remember the day I asked her father for his blessing. I sat across from him at his kitchen table, hands shaking, and I told him the truth. I said, "Sir, I don't have money, I don't have connections, but I promise you, your daughter will never go hungry, she will never feel alone, and she will never doubt that she is loved." Her father looked at me for a long time. Then he nodded slowly and said, "A man who is honest about what he has is worth more than a man who lies about what he doesn't." We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony, 40 people, a borrowed suit, and a cake that my mother baked herself. It was the happiest day of my life. We built our life slowly, brick by brick, year by year. I started teaching at the local middle school, English and history. Patricia worked as a seamstress for the first few years, taking in alterations and hemming wedding dresses at our kitchen table after dinner. We had 2 children. Our son, Marcus, came first, then our daughter, Lily. I will tell you something about raising children on a teacher's salary. It teaches you creativity. It teaches you sacrifice. It teaches you that love is not measured in what you give your children, but in how present you are when you give it. I coached Marcus's little league team every Saturday morning for 6 years. I read Lily bedtime stories every single night until she was old enough to roll her eyes at me. I helped both of them with their homework at the dinner table, and when I didn't know an answer, I sat beside them and we looked it up together. We were not wealthy, but we were full. Our house was full of laughter, full of noise, full of the smell of Patricia's cooking on Sunday afternoons, the kind of smell that wraps around you like a blanket. Those were good years, quiet years, years I thought would last forever. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. I cannot tell you exactly when Patricia started to feel ashamed of me. I cannot point to a single day and say there, that is where it began. But looking back now, I think it started when Marcus grew up and became successful. My son is an architect. He is brilliant, I say that not as a proud father exaggerating, but as a man who watched his boy stay up until 2 in the morning, drawing floor plans on graph paper, who watched him earn a full scholarship, who watched him graduate at the top of his class. Marcus built something real, and Marcus married a woman named Vivienne. Vivienne is beautiful, she is sharp, she dresses like she belongs on the cover of a magazine, and she speaks with the kind of confidence that fills a room before she even says a word. She comes from money, old money, the kind with a family name attached to it. The first time Vivienne came to our house for dinner, I could see her eyes doing a quiet survey of everything. The modest furniture, the old carpet, the kitchen tiles that I had repaired myself with grout from the hardware store. She smiled the entire time, but it was the kind of smile that sits on top of something else. After that dinner, I noticed Patricia began looking at our house differently too. Then Marcus and Vivienne had their first home built, a large, beautiful house in the new part of town with high ceilings and a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a cooking show. We started spending more time there for family gatherings, and slowly, Patricia began spending more time with Vivienne and her circle of friends. Women married to lawyers, surgeons, real estate developers, women who drove imported cars and took vacations to places I had only seen in geography textbooks. I did not begrudge any of them their success. God bless them, every one of them. But I noticed something happening to Patricia in those circles. She would come home quieter than when she left. She would look at me across the dinner table with an expression I did not recognize at first. It took me a long time to name that expression. It was embarrassment. The birthday that broke my heart. Now we arrive at March 14th. Patricia's 51st birthday. A few weeks before the birthday, I overheard Patricia on the phone with Vivienne. I was not listening intentionally. I was coming down the hallway to ask about dinner. But I stopped when I heard my name. I just think it would be more comfortable, Vivienne. Daniel doesn't really fit in with that group. You know how he is. He'll sit in the corner and talk about school curriculum while everyone else is discussing investment portfolios. I stood in that hallway for a moment. Then I turned around and walked back to my study. I told myself I had heard wrong. I told myself Patricia would never do what I thought she was planning. But on the morning of March 14th, I woke up early and made her breakfast. I made her the same breakfast I had made her every birthday for 31 years. Scrambled eggs with fresh chives, buttered toast, a small glass of orange juice, and a single candle stuck into a piece of chocolate cake that I had baked the night before. I carried the tray to our bedroom and sang Happy Birthday in my off-key voice that used to make her laugh until she cried. She smiled. She kissed my cheek. She said thank you. Then, as I was washing the dishes an hour later, she came into the kitchen and said, very casually, "The birthday party is tonight at Marcus and Vivienne's house, 7 o'clock. I turned around, drying my hands on a dish towel. All right, I'll wear my blue shirt. Should I bring anything? Patricia did not look at me right away. She looked at the counter, then at the window, then finally at me. Daniel, I'd like it to be just the family and some of my friends. You don't have to come. I felt the words land somewhere below my ribs. Patricia, I said slowly, what do you mean, I don't have to come? It's your birthday. She set down her coffee cup. And then she said it, just like that, calm, matter of fact, as if she had rehearsed it. All of my friends' husbands are successful men, Daniel, doctors, lawyers, businessmen, and you're just an ordinary teacher. I'm ashamed. I don't want to have to explain you to people. The kitchen was very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I looked at my wife, this woman I had loved for 31 years, this woman for whom I had sacrificed and worked and stayed up late and given everything I had inside me, and I felt something in my chest grow very, very still. I did not shout. I did not argue. I did not slam anything or say a single cruel word. I folded the dish towel neatly. I placed it on the counter, and I walked away. I went to my study, and I sat in my old chair, the brown leather one with the crack down the left armrest that I had been meaning to fix for 3 years. I sat there for a long time. I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the young man who had stood in front of Patricia's father with shaking hands and made a promise. I thought about 31 winters, 31 summers. I thought about the nights I had graded papers until my eyes burned so that Patricia could sleep without worrying about money. I thought about the year that Lily got sick, really sick, a kidney infection that put her in the hospital for 2 weeks, and I had worked double shifts tutoring students on weekends to cover the medical bills without telling Patricia how close we had come to having nothing. I thought about all the birthday parties I had planned for Patricia over the years. The surprise party I organized when she turned 40, calling every friend she had, decorating the living room with her favorite yellow flowers. And I thought about what she had just said to me. "You're just an ordinary teacher. I'm ashamed of you. I am not going to lie to you," I cried, quietly, alone in that chair, with the door closed. I cried the way old men cry, without much sound. Just water running down a face that has learned not to show everything it feels. Then I wiped my face, and I made a decision. That evening, Patricia dressed up beautifully. She wore a red dress that I had bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. She put on the pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother. She looked wonderful. Before she left, she stopped at the door of my study. "I was reading. Daniel," she started. I looked up. I hope you understand," she said. "It's not personal. It's just, have a good evening, Patricia," I said. "Happy birthday." She stood there for a moment, then she nodded and left. I listened to her car pull out of the driveway. Then I went back to reading. Here is where I have to stop and tell you something. Something that Patricia did not know. Something that Marcus did not know. Something that Vivienne and all those successful husbands and all those impressive friends, none of them knew. Something that only 3 people in the world knew, and 2 of them had been sworn to silence for almost a year. Are you paying attention? Because this is the part of the story that changes everything. 18 months before that birthday, I was called into the principal's office at my school. I had been teaching there for 26 years at that point. I knew every creak in the floor, every drafty window, every child who needed a little extra patience and a little extra kindness. But that morning, the principal, a good man named Harold Green, closed his office door and told me that the school had received a very large, anonymous donation. A grant specifically designated for educational innovation in underserved communities. The grant was worth $480,000, and the donor had left one condition. The condition was that the grant be administered by a teacher. Specifically, a teacher who had given long service to the school and understood the community from the inside. Not an administrator, not a consultant, a teacher. Harold looked at me and said, "Daniel, in 26 years, I have never seen a teacher love this school the way you do. The donor asked me to choose someone. I'm choosing you." I stared at him. "Harold, I'm a teacher. I don't know anything about administering a grant this size. That's why." Harold said with a slight smile, "The donor also left funding for a financial advisor to work alongside you." I went home that day and sat in my car in the driveway for 15 minutes, just breathing. I did not tell Patricia immediately. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment. But the truth, the honest truth, was that I had grown so accustomed to Patricia undervaluing what I did that I was not sure she would even understand what had happened. I was afraid she would shrug and say, "That's nice, dear," and go back to her phone, so I said nothing. I worked with the financial advisor. I met with the school board. I quietly began doing the most important work of my professional life. I set up after-school programs. I brought in new books. I hired 3 additional teachers. I partnered with a local nonprofit to fund school meals for children who were coming to school hungry. And 8 months into this work, the story caught the attention of a journalist. She was writing a piece for a national education magazine about grassroots change in public schools. She came to our school. She spent 3 days observing. She interviewed students, teachers, parents. She interviewed me. The article was published 6 weeks before Patricia's birthday. It was titled, "The Teacher Who Changed Everything." It ran 12 pages. My photograph was on the cover. I had received a copy from the magazine and placed it quietly in my desk drawer. I had been carrying it around, not sure what to do with it, not sure who I was saving it for. Now, sitting alone in my study on the evening of Patricia's birthday party, the party I had not been invited to, I opened that desk drawer, took out the magazine, and looked at my own face on the cover. I put it back in the drawer. Then I turned off my lamp, and I went to bed. Patricia came home just after midnight. I heard her heels on the hardwood floor, heard her moving quietly through the house, trying not to wake me. I was not asleep. She got into bed carefully. In the dark, I could feel her lying there, awake. Neither of us spoke. In the morning, she made coffee and brought me a cup without being asked. She sat across from me at the kitchen table. She looked like she had something to say but could not find the beginning of it. I waited. "Did you eat last night?" she finally asked. "Yes," I said. Silence. "Was it a good party?" I asked. "It was fine," she said quietly. We sat like that for a while, two people who had once talked for 3 hours on a park bench, now sitting with nothing to say to each other. I got up, rinsed my cup, put on my jacket. "I'll be home by 6, I said, and I went to school. It was a Tuesday. I was in the middle of my second period history class when there was a knock at my classroom door. One of the office assistants, a young woman named Carol, opened the door and said, "Mr. Daniel, I'm sorry to interrupt. There are some people here to see you. Tell them I'll be out at lunch." I said, "Sir," Carol said carefully, I think you should come now." I excused myself and walked to the front office, and there, standing in the hallway outside my school, were 2 men in suits and a woman with a camera. The woman said, "Mr. Daniel, my name is Sandra Park. I'm a producer with the National Education Foundation. We've been trying to reach you." I blinked. "Reach me for what?" she smiled. "Sir, you've been selected as this year's recipient of the National Excellence in Education Award. It's the highest honor given to a working classroom teacher in this country. The ceremony is next month in Washington, D.C. The prize includes a $50,000 personal award and a further $200,000 for your school." I stood in that hallway, in my worn jacket with the elbow patches, holding a stack of student essays, and I could not speak for a full 10 seconds. "Are you sure you have the right person?" I finally said. Sandra laughed. "Daniel Harris, 27 years of service, currently administering the Greenfield Community Education Grant. Cover of the Education Monthly magazine. Yes, Mr. Daniel, we have absolutely right person." Word travels fast in small communities. By the time I got home that evening, my phone had 17 missed calls. 3 from Marcus, 2 from Lily, 1 from Harold, and 11 from numbers I did not recognize, journalists, it turned out. I was sitting at the kitchen table, reading through the messages, when Patricia came home from her afternoon plans. She stopped in the doorway when she saw me. She could see from my face that something had happened. "Daniel, what's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," I said. "Sit down, Patricia." She sat. I looked at her for a moment. Then I got up, went to my study, opened the drawer, and brought out the magazine. I placed it on the table in front of her. She looked at the cover. She looked at my face on that cover. She looked at the title of the article. Then she looked up at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was not happiness. It was not pride. It was something more complicated and more painful than both of those things. "Went," she began. 18 months ago, I said, I was appointed to administer an education grant, almost $500,000. I've been running it quietly for over a year. She stared at the magazine. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "You tell me, Patricia," I said gently. "Why would I have?" She had no answer for that, today. I continued, I was informed that I have been selected as the national recipient of the Excellence in Education Award. The ceremony is in Washington. There is a prize. There is significant funding for the school. Patricia pressed her hand over her mouth. And tomorrow, I said, there will likely be reporters. There will be phone calls. There will be people who want to talk to me. And they will also, eventually, want to talk to you. As my wife, I folded my hands on the table. And I want you to think carefully, Patricia, before any of that happens, before our son calls back, and before Vivienne finds out, and before all those successful husbands at your birthday party find out, I want you to sit with what you said to me yesterday morning in this kitchen. She was crying now, quietly into her hand. I'm just an ordinary teacher. I said, those were your words. Marcus arrived 40 minutes later. He must have been driving fast. He came through the front door without knocking, still his habit after all these years, and he stopped when he saw us sitting at the table. He could tell immediately from the atmosphere in the room that he had walked into something larger than he understood. Dad, he said. He crossed the room and gripped my shoulder. Dad, is it true? The award? It is, I said. Marcus looked at his mother. She looked away. How long have you known about all this? He asked me. A while, I said. Why didn't you say anything? I looked at my son, this brilliant man I had raised, this good man who loved me, I believe, deeply, and I said, Marcus, I have a question for you, and I need you to answer me honestly. He nodded. Did you know your mother did not invite me to her birthday party last night? The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. Marcus had known. He had not called me, had not said a word to his mother, had allowed it to happen. Dad, I'm not angry with you. I said, I want you to know that, but I need you to understand something. I leaned forward. I have spent 31 years loving this family, 31 years working and giving and being present for every single thing that mattered, the nights in the hospital with your sister, the years your mother and I had no savings account because everything went back into making sure you had what you needed, the hundreds of students who came through my classroom and whose lives were changed, not because I was spectacular, but because I showed up every single day and cared about what I was doing. I paused. Your mother is ashamed of me because I am a teacher, because I drive an old car, because I cannot discuss investment portfolios at parties. And I want to ask you, Marcus, as my son, when did the work a man does become more important than the kind of man he is? Marcus sat down. He put his face in his hands. And he stayed like that for a long time. Vivienne arrived an hour later. She walked in wearing her good coat, and for the first time since I had known her, she was quiet. Not the quiet of disinterest, the quiet of someone who already knows she has something to answer for. She sat beside Marcus, she looked at me, and then she said something I did not expect. Mr. Daniel, she said slowly, I owe you an apology. I said nothing. I let her continue. I know that Patricia's decision about the party was influenced by conversations she and I had. I won't pretend otherwise. I spoke about you in ways that were unkind and wrong, and I am sorry. She was not crying. Vivienne was not the kind of woman who cried easily, but there was something in her voice that I had never heard before, a kind of genuine humility that cost something to produce. What you've done for this community, for this school, I didn't know. And even if I had known, the way I spoke about you was wrong. Success is not only what you can see in a bank account. My own father taught me that, and somewhere along the way I forgot it. She reached across the table and placed her hand briefly over mine. I am sorry, she said again. That night, my daughter Lily drove 3 hours from the city where she lives. Lily is 26. She works as a nurse. She has her mother's eyes and her grandmother's stubbornness, and I have always believed my own particular kind of heart, the kind that feels things deeply and hides it quietly. She came through the door, and she walked straight to me, and she hugged me the way she used to when she was small, wrapping both arms around my neck, pressing her face against my shoulder. "Dad," she said, "I heard everything. I am so proud of you. I have always been so proud of you." I held my daughter. "I know, baby," I said. "I know. Mom is in the kitchen," Lily said after a moment, pulling back to look at my face. "She's been in there for a long time." I nodded. "She loves you, Dad. She got lost for a while, but she loves you." "I know that too," I said. I went to the kitchen. Patricia was standing at the sink, not washing anything, just standing there, looking out the window at the back garden where I had built a small wooden bench years ago. The bench where I used to sit with Lily when she was small and teach her the names of the stars. I stood in the doorway. Patricia, she turned. Her face was tired and older than I had ever seen it look. The kind of tired that is not about sleep. "I don't know when I became this person," she said. Her voice was raw. "I don't know when I started caring so much about what other people had, what other people thought, what other people could see. I don't know when that started being more important to me than what was real." She crossed her arms over herself, like she was cold. "You have never, not once in 31 years, made me feel small, and I made you feel small in your own home, in your own kitchen, on your own birthday gift to me." She stopped, swallowed. "I don't know if you can forgive me for that." I walked across the kitchen. I stood in front of my wife, this woman I had loved since we were young and poor and full of nothing but each other, and I looked at her for a long moment. "Patricia," I said, "I don't need you to be proud of what I have achieved. I don't need an award or a magazine cover or anyone's applause to know the value of the work I have done. I knew it. I have always known it." I took her hand. "What I needed, what I have needed, was for the woman who knows me best in this world not to be ashamed of who I am. That's all. That was the only thing." She began to cry in earnest then, not quietly, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and old. "I'm sorry," she said. "Daniel, I am so sorry." I held her. The kitchen was warm. Outside, the garden was dark. I held my wife and I let her cry, and I thought about the bench under the stars, and the umbrella in the rain, and the breakfast tray with the candle on the cake, and all the 31 years between the beginning and right now. "I know," I said. The ceremony was on a Friday evening in April. I wore a suit that Marcus and Lily had taken me to buy together. It was charcoal gray. It fit properly for the first time in my life. Patricia wore a blue dress. She held my arm from the moment we arrived until the moment we left, and she did not let go for any reason. Marcus and Vivienne were there. Lily was there, crying from the moment they called my name to the podium. When I stood at that microphone and looked out at the audience, I was not thinking about the award. I was not thinking about the grant or the school or the programs I had built. I was thinking about 30 years of early mornings, of quiet classrooms, of children who came in carrying trouble and left carrying something small but solid, a little more belief in their own minds, a little more trust in the possibility of their own futures. I was thinking about every student who ever turned around in their chair and looked at me like I might have an answer. I spoke for 7 minutes. I said that the greatest reward I had ever received had not come from any institution or organization. It had come in the form of students who became good people, students who grew up and treated the world with a little more care because someone had shown them how. I said that teaching is not ordinary. I said that teaching is perhaps the most important work there is, because every other profession, every doctor, every architect, every lawyer, every business person in this world first sat in someone's classroom. At that last line, I saw Marcus bow his head, and I saw Patricia press her hand against her heart. There is one more thing I need to tell you. 3 days after the ceremony, I went back to school. I walked into my classroom. The desks were in the usual rows. The board was clean. The morning light came through the windows exactly the way it always has. My students were waiting. They had made a banner. It hung across the front of the room, lopsided and glittery and misspelled in 2 places. It read, "We always knew you were the best, Mr. Daniel." I stood in the doorway. 32-12-year-olds looked at me. "I have received a national award. My photograph has been in a magazine. I have been given $50,000. But nothing in this world felt like standing in that doorway and looking at that banner. I sat down at my desk. I opened my register, and I began. I want to say something before I go, something important. This is not a story about success. It is not a story about prizes or magazine covers or grant money. Those things are real, and I am grateful for them, but they are not the point. The point is this: we live in a world that has taught us to measure people by what they earn and what they own and what title sits beside their name. We have been taught to look at a man's car before we look at his hands. We have been taught to ask, "What do you do?" before we ask, "Who are you?" And somewhere in the noise of all that measuring and comparing, we forget the people standing right in front of us. We forget the ones who have been there all along, steady, quiet, giving without announcement. My wife forgot, for a time. She got caught in the noise. She started listening to the wrong voices, measuring with the wrong ruler. But here is what I want to say about Patricia. She found her way back, and that took courage too, the courage to sit in a kitchen at midnight and say, "I was wrong to the person you hurt the most." That kind of courage is not small. Love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make again and again, especially after you have made a mistake, especially when the other person had every right to walk away and didn't. I did not walk away, not because I was weak, not because I had nowhere to go, but because I knew, in the deepest part of myself, that Patricia was worth the patience it took to wait for her to remember who we were. That is what love looks like after 31 years. It does not look like a grand gesture. It looks like a man folding a dish towel and walking away from a fight he could have won, and waiting with a whole heart for the truth to come out on its own. Because it always does. The truth always comes out, not to punish anyone, not to embarrass anyone, simply because the truth is patient in a way that nothing else is. And one more thing. To every teacher watching this, every man or woman who has ever stood in front of a classroom and wondered whether any of it matters, it matters. You matter. The child sitting in the 3rd row who is struggling to stay awake because his parents fought last night. You are the steadiest thing in his day. The girl in the back who has started to believe she is not smart enough. Your voice is the one she will hear when she finally tries. The boy who acts out and causes trouble and sits outside the principal's office. One teacher, one sentence, one moment of being truly seen can change the entire direction of a life. You may never be on the cover of a magazine. You may never receive an award. You may drive an old car and mend your own jacket and eat lunch alone in a classroom surrounded by student artwork that nobody else will ever see. But you are not ordinary. You have never been ordinary. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. Not your colleagues, not your neighbors, not even the person who sleeps beside you. Know your worth. Do your work, love without condition, and let the truth do the rest. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you to look more closely at the quiet, steady people in your life, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Because sometimes the most important stories are the ones about ordinary people who were never ordinary at all.